Mm. Now my mouth is full of Vegemite cheese. I can't get it out of my... Okay. Yes. I just want to be happy. Who else resonates with that sentence? Who else shapes a lot of their decisions based on that sentence? The desire to be happy. The things you choose to do, the people you choose to hang out with, you probably do it because they make you happy and because you like them and they make you feel good. When we look at a lot of wisdom, conventional wisdom today, it is really driven to this core purpose, to be happy. But this is not an unusual thing. This is not a modern thing. We have always wanted to think about being happy. Philosophy and wisdom, by the way, do you know what philosophy means? It's 2 words. It's 2 Greek words. Oh, Sylvia. No, let someone else. We'll let some other people enjoy the beautiful Greek culture. What does philosophy mean?
The love of wisdom.
It is the love of wisdom. And there was another word which was associated with it, which effectively is 2 words again, which is the love of the good. It is what defined what philosophy was about. Today, if we went and did a philosophy course, you'd probably walk away with a sore head and you'd walk away with a ton of questions. Philosophy courses and philosophy in the West often is defined by, well, what feels like a sea of information and questions with no answers. But in ancient times, and particularly in Greek culture, philosophy was the quest for how to live a good life, how to live a happy life, and how to have a culture and a community that is functioning and good. And we might think that that's something that the ancients talked about and sat around with their, in their thinking pose and in their beautiful marble palaces and temples, and they thought all day, what does it mean to be alive? Oh, I don't know. And, it would be a back and forth, and they would discuss, well, it means to do good things, and we'd think, oh, okay, that's what wisdom is. But today, we still care about wisdom. You go to the self-help section of a bookstore, and you'll notice that there is many different types of wisdoms available to you. By the way, I must clarify here before I go any further. What is wisdom at the core of it? What is wisdom all about? I hear a lot of people talk about wisdom and often define it like knowledge. You know the saying, knowledge is that tomato is a what? Is a fruit. That's knowledge. But what is wisdom? Not putting it in a fruit salad. Now listen carefully to that famous catchphrase. What is wisdom if you think about it? Can you hear it? At its core, wisdom is about something that you do. It's about something practical. See, when you go to the self-help aisle and you check out the books, whether it's Jordan Peterson's with his 12 Simple Rules for Life, or you turn on maybe the TV and watch Oprah, what are they always talking about? What is the best way to live? Maybe an interview with somebody who's doing something amazing, a doctor or an adventurer or an actor who has something to share with you that's worthwhile listening to. I know when the Barefoot Investor book came out, everybody was going crazy and signing up for an ING bank account. And I did it too. I don't even know why I did it. It's just everyone else was doing it, and now I have an ING bank account that is part of it. But really, his whole wisdom is about how to use money appropriately and how to use it the best. There's been some other books that is The Subtle Art of Not Giving... we're not going to finish that sentence. Or Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's so many different types of wisdoms, which are at the core of it is about what? Not about knowledge, about what to do, or what is the right thing to do, but how to do it. That's what wisdom is all about. And we know wisdom when we see it. So Aristotle and Socrates, they talked about it back in the day, Plato too, but we have it today. We have a desire for wisdom. And why do we care about wisdom? It's because we want to be happy. Why would we spend so much time thinking about how to manage our money unless we wanted to not be bankrupt? Why would we talk about how to have a good conversation with somebody, or how to eat healthily, or how to have a good emotional state of mind? Why would we do that unless we want to flourish? It is a core human desire. You didn't wake up this morning and say, I'm going to make the worst possible choices. I'm going to do the worst possible things so that I can be absolutely miserable. If you did, there's probably something seriously wrong. So the question then leads us to, how do we actually have happiness? Because we all want it and we all live for it. But in our capitalist society, what is happiness really defined by? I bought a TV in 2016, which was an LED TV. I remember taking that bad boy home. It was Boxing Day sales. And I've only now realized why Boxing Day sales exist. Because only a couple weeks later, Samsung released the OLED TV. I don't even know what the O means, and they're releasing it, and apparently it's 10 times better. This is how they defined it when I remember seeing it. The blacks are even blacker. And I thought, how do you get blacker than black? It's black, right? and so I realized that, well, actually, it's a fleeting thing, because then the OLED come out, and then there's a ULED. Again, I'm still not even sure what the O was. Now there's a U, and I'm still struggling. But that is the core feeling of capitalist culture. Happiness is having the latest. Happiness is having the newest. Happiness is having enough money to do the things you want, to go to the places, to visit those vacation holidays, to buy the thing you like, and to have the people around you that really value. Or is happiness having a high body count? Some of you won't even know what that means, but basically it's about having as many partners as possible and showing that you have sexual prowess. Is that happiness? Is it having tons of followers on TikTok and Instagram and making sure you have a very long streak with someone on Snapchat? Are those things happiness? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand and say, yes, I believe that those are happiness, right? But these are the things that are often put before us, and the means with which that happens is often commercials, advertising, media. Its sole purpose, and this was something that really brought to my attention the whole purpose of social media. If something is free, you are the product. Do you like being the product in the store that everybody's looking at, trying to buy you? That is, in essence, we think it's a one-way screen when we're scrolling, but someone's on the other side evaluating. Well, it's actually algorithm, and it's not as creepy as it sounds, but really they're evaluating everything you're doing and making decisions as a result. But I'll get to that a little bit later. I just want to be happy is the greatest motivator for all of our choices. That is the key thing that we can walk away from here. But how do we be happy? And I love this thought, because we might think that happiness is at the TAB, or it's down at the pub, or we might think that happiness is finishing our favorite Netflix TV show, that whatever's new on the stream, whatever's number one in Australia, we want to finish that because everyone's watching it. But what is truly happiness? Well, my suggestion to you today is not that you have it's all about your desires being skewed. You have desires as a human being, and those are normal. You all want to be accepted. You all want to have some nice things. You want to feel safe. But this is the problem. This is the problem that you and I have, from my perspective. We dream too small. We desire too small. We want too small things. I want us to actually start thinking a bit bigger. The happiness that you have been striving for and that I have been striving for is too small. I want you to be 10 times happier, 100 times happier, 1,000,000 times happier right now. Some of you are thinking, this guy sounds like a motivational speaker, and he's like going to sell me Amway or something, right? But I'm not going to start asking you to join my pyramid scheme. I assure you of that. But what I do want you to recognize is that happiness, often the things we strive for, are just too small. A perfect example, and I can talk to you here, I think, when somebody goes to watch pornography, it is not something to the side of God's plan for sexuality. It's something too small compared to God's plan for sexuality. I have this beautiful quote I must read to you, and I'll unpack it. It's from C.S. Lewis from his book, Weight of Glory. He says, our God finds our desires for happiness not too strong. He actually finds them too weak. He goes on to say, we're half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. Translation, we are offered something amazing that is massive, and we keep going for something really tiny. Something that is nothing in comparison. When my wife and I and our kids moved to Broadbeach. And I say that in a really weird way because I'm actually homeless. For those of you who haven't heard the story, I don't actually have a home now. I've left the Sunshine Coast to move to the Gold Coast, and I'm hoping that there's a home somewhere that the Lord has planned in His providence. But at this point, I'm living in temporary accommodation, and I'm living in Broadbeach. It's quite nice. I have a McDonald's right out there that I can see, and I can see the petrol, so I know exactly how much the petrol costs that day from my living room. It's just a motel. But when we moved in, I was supposed to go and visit with the other pastors in the school to kind of get to know the teachers on their first day. It's called Pancake with the Pastors. I was very excited. My first day at Gold Coast to do ministry. And I get a phone call from my wife. So this is Monday past. I feel like it's so long ago. It's Monday past. And I get a phone call, and Dari says, can you quickly come back? Elias has locked himself in the room. I'm going, locked himself in the room. So like swaps over to the video on Messenger, and she's showing me, she's trying to open this door and just can't. Now, like most internal doors in a house or in an apartment, you can kind of get a knife and do the thing. No, this has like a lock on it. And I'm thinking, why would one room in the house have a lock? So I turn around, I drive back 20 minutes, run up the stairs. I'm thinking, man, he's probably petrified, which he was. He was like crying because he's 2 years old. And I get my key. So we think it's the key. I had it, and I go to open it, and it doesn't open. I'm thinking to myself, why would they put a door that you can't unlock the general way, but also you can't open with the key they gave you? So at this point, my son is hysterical, crying inside the room, and we call up the people downstairs, the concierge, and we say, hey, can we have like some help here? Our son is locked in the room. And she said, well, if we come out now, it's 8:45, we're going to have to charge you $70, but if you wait till 9, it's free. I thought, my son is locked in this room. Wait till 9. No. We said, well, can you come up? And anyway, so they come up, and they go to open the door, and up until this point, we've been trying everything. I've even looked up a YouTube tutorial. I'm trying to pick the lock. Like as if I'm going to learn lock picking in the space of 1 minute, trying all sorts of things. The other thing I tried was that I got a phone and recorded myself locking another door, and I was talking okay, Elias, watch daddy, I'm unlocking, and I'm recording, and I go to the window and I'm like, look at the video, and he's just crying, he's not even looking, right? He's freaking out. But eventually the lady comes and unlocks the door. All it was one of those little twist ones that you probably have in your bedroom. But when he unlocks it, he comes running out, and he's excited. He's running everywhere. And we're kind of happy, and the lady's asking us for our bank details so she can charge us for coming upstairs. And it was really strange. But what I felt in that moment is, this apartment, it's quite beautiful. I don't think I'd be able to afford it. I'm thankful that the conference is putting us up in it so that we can have a home. But as I look around, it's this big apartment. But for some reason, Elias chose to go into that room, to close that door, and to lock it, but he couldn't figure out how to unlock it. And it made me start thinking. I've been thinking on this, and I was thinking on this very topic that night before. And I just started to think, isn't it just like us humans to have all this option, but we just want to lock ourselves into something that we think this is going to make us happy? And then we realize, it's actually not all it was cracked up to be. See, the problem C.S. Lewis is bringing out to our attention is not that you have desires, you just have weak desire. As human beings, we're replacing God with something else that truly will never make us happy, that will never satisfy that eternal longing. He uses an analogy, and he says we're like children who want to go all day making mud pies in the slum. A kid, imagine him, living in the slum. Remember Charlene's story. Someone impoverished and poor, and they're in the slums, and they're making mud pies. When really what was promised to the child was a trip to the beautiful Sicilian the beaches, right? To see the beautiful landscape. And we're like that child, and we think, we're going to have as much fun with this mud pie when there's a holiday on offer. Who's going to want to stay in the slums? Well, his point is that we tend to find ourselves that way. So we have this yearning and this eternal desire for happiness, but why is it that we keep going back to the things that never truly satisfy, never truly make us happy? There's lots of philosophies out there. There are lots of wisdoms that could be offered to you. Books, self-help, you name it. But all of them are not as extensive as one philosophy that is worth believing and following. See, the values of the Greeks and the values of our desire to have happiness has been around forever. And actually, the Bible offers the very same understanding of that human desire for happiness and offers a way to live that will give happiness. It's interesting. If you were to explore Psalm 1:1, the start of the hymn book of the Bible, the start of the song book of the Bible, the very first word is blessed or blessed. When you look at that in the Greek translation of the Bible, the word used is makrii, which basically means happiness. Happy is the person, and what does it define it as? Happy is the person who doesn't hang out with people who are scornful and mockers and just evil people, foolish people, but chooses to meditate on the Word of God day and night, that it shapes their thinking. That person is happy. See, the Old Testament, the whole Bible is actually designed to show you how is the best way to live. What does it mean to be human? It has a lot of stories of people that try to find humanity the usual way. They have weak desires, and they always end up miserable. They always end up broken. The very first story of the Bible is of a beautiful couple that love each other, and within a short period of time, they're fighting each other. Isn't that just so human? That brothers then become enemies within moments because of competition. This is the interesting story of the Bible. But this is the key point of the Bible. It's not just to tell us that there's lots of bad stuff and that we can't figure it out. But here is what one Jewish author says about the Bible. Now, he's talking about the Old Testament. I'll get to the New Testament in a second. But he says this: the point of Israel's history is not just to give you some facts. How many of you have spent so much time in Bible trivia remembering stories? I mean, that's like level 1. And then the invitation is to go to level 2. What is level 2? Well, he says this: it's not just about historical events, but to cast a vision of the true and the good of all the world. A true and the good for all the world. What would it look like if every single person was flourishing? Not just me, because I often think about Jacob. What does it mean that Jacob will be happy? But what would it look like if everyone was happy? That is the Bible's picture. Talks about a beautiful garden in Eden, and you know that Eden means pleasure. So literally the first place in the Bible is described as a garden of pleasure. I imagine like a theme park when I hear the word pleasure. I imagine a place where you go to have fun and you go and enjoy yourself, where there's joy and there's children running around and nothing bad happening. That's the picture of the Bible. And of course, there is the human element that comes in and the brokenness. See, when we talk about this very thing, we forget to realize that being a Christian is also having a philosophy. And what was a philosophy? It's a way of life. It's the love of wisdom. It's love of the good. It's a way of living life that will produce a good and flourishing life. Let me show you the earliest picture of Jesus. Let me show you the earliest picture of Jesus. Can we pull up my first picture and I'll see if this bad boy works? That is okay. This is a place called Dura Europos. It's actually on the shore of the Euphrates River. So modern day Iraq. Imagine this is where it is. Now, in 238 AD is what they've dated this construction of this building to, or the last time rather that it was heavily inhabited, was a Roman colony. And I believe I've also got a picture. Oh, I don't know if I have to dance to do this. Okay. Yep. Okay, there we go. This is a bit of a map of the region. Okay, so just to give you a picture of where this picture was drawn, that is the Euphrates River in the north, and that's what was believed to be the size of the town itself, Dura Europos. Now, what's interesting is M8, which I can recognize for you guys, you're really going to struggle, is just down here. There's a laser? Ah, fantastic. This is M8. Now, the main gate is here, and there is another gate here, but as you entered in, it's the city walls, and in the city walls was this house built where people could live. But this house was eventually converted into a church. It was a common thing that churches, that Christians met in houses rather than in tents or in buildings, right? Now, the interesting thing is the reason we know it's a church is they've converted their living room to be a bigger space. And why would you do that? So you can get together and you can worship and you can read the Bible and you can talk about things. But also, they also have a baptismal font in there. And it's a big thing. It's a beautiful thing. Now, this is where the interesting thing comes in. The first picture of Jesus was found in here, and it dates back to 238. Next, please. AD. Next slide. Awesome. And that's the picture. If you ever doubt that your stick picture drawings are invaluable, this is just a reminder that any artist can be immortalized. This is the first picture of Jesus. Now, is there anything you can notice about the picture? I know it's hard to... He's holding an umbrella. Did someone say he's holding an umbrella? Okay, yes, you see the ram, and he's holding the ram. So it's a very common image, and you've probably seen modern drawings of this, of Jesus carrying a lamb, yeah, like the good shepherd, right? Returning home with the one that walked away. And there's actually more sheep off to the side, or more goats, or whatever they're trying to draw, right? But there is some interesting detail about the way that Jesus is drawn. And this is what a lot of historians and scholars have noticed. You might notice over his shoulder is a sash. And we've actually seen that kind of rendition of Jesus in lots of ways. But here, what's significant about it is the kind of people who would wear sashes. And that's actually the philosophers. Philosophers would meet together in these beautiful white robes with a sash over it, and they would sit and discuss the important things of life. The way to live, what's the best life, and they would discuss lots of different ways. So you'd have people that were of the Epicurean way of thinking that said, the gods, they're far away, you just live for pleasure, do what you want, and you'll be happy. Or you might have some of a different vein of philosophy that would suggest that you just have to suppress your emotions, you have to deal with it, because don't worry, it just keeps coming around and around. The name of the group has left me. But what's the interesting thing is that Jesus is depicted in the very first picture as a shepherd and a philosopher. It's a really remarkable picture. Why would they choose to do that? Because Jesus, at the core of his teaching, is offering a life worth living. If you have a phone or a Bible, open up to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. It is considered the first sermon of Jesus by many, but it's probably not. But what happened was Matthew has collected a lot of Jesus' teachings and made it into a nice format for us so that we can read it. And he's selected 5 sermons and he's brought them together and put them on different topics. But Matthew 5 is very fascinating because he gathers his disciples together, which is what a lot of philosophers did. A lot of teachers gathered people around them to talk to them about important things. And he offers a certain way of living. The very first word that comes out of his mouth, Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. Have you spotted it there? Blessed. There it is again. And this is a word that gets used throughout the Greek world whenever they're talking about what it means to live the best life. If you were to go, it would be found in the self-help section, right? Like it fits into the category of those books. But the interesting thing is his wisdom is so different. Listen to the words of the first one. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Or blessed are the miserable, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Or maybe a bit more clear. Happy are the miserable, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What a strange wisdom. I can imagine as Jesus started speaking, people would have leant forward and thought, what in the world does that mean? And he would take it further and said, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted, and blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. But at the core of each one is makari. Happy are those who are unhappy in the spirit, or who feel their spiritual bankruptcy, that they're poor, that they have nothing, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This is a very interesting thing about Jesus' teaching. He would connect his trust in God with everyday life. He would connect it to the day-to-day living in such a way that is so fundamental that I think if you have attended a church all your life, you've probably missed. If you've attended a church all your life, you've probably missed. Unlike us, we tend to separate our faith from our day-to-day life. There is church and there is the rest of my life. But Jesus did it very differently. And he did it in a way that was quite interesting. wisdom was often passed down to disciples in a very smart way. And I actually think I would like to learn to do this a bit better as somebody who speaks to people. But if we were to think about the way that Jesus shared his message, he often used pithy sayings or sayings that were really sharp and memorable to help you get the point. We still do it. So if I was to say to you today, laughter is the best medicine, what am I saying? What is the message behind that saying? What is it? Enjoy your life more. Yep. What was a cheerful heart is good medicine. Yeah. So if you choose to, I wrote that humor heals wounds. Right. If you can laugh it off, then a lot of the problems tend to be mitigated. You can heal a bit. What about no man is an island? You have to work together, right? It's a very visual image. It's almost like a parable in some ways, but it's sharp and to the point, and you can probably remember the meaning behind it, even though you don't describe it to people. No man in his island basically says, can't do it yourself. You get what you pay for. Have you ever used that line before? What am I saying when I say you get what you pay for?
There are consequences to your actions.
Yep. And if I go cheap, I'm probably going to regret it, right? If I go for the SsangYong car or the MG, as I've discovered recently, I'm not going to be happy, right? But if I go for the Subaru, which I did, I'll be a lot happier. This one's an interesting one. Measure twice, cut once. Have you heard this before? This is actually from a comedian, Nick Offerman. He's apparently the one that came up with this. Measure twice, count once. What does that mean?
Be sure of yourself.
Yeah, double check. Be sure of yourself. If you're going to make a decision, you better make sure it's right before there's no going back, right? Now, this is the interesting... He didn't make it up? Oh, okay. All right, maybe ChatGPT let me down. Now, this is the interesting thing. Jesus taught his disciples using short sayings. How memorable is this? Do to others as you'd have them do to you. You remember hearing that one before? I know non-Christians who would quote that to me. This is an interesting one. Don't judge lest you be judged. I've heard people say that to me who are non-Christian too. The last will be first and the first will be last. Now, this is an interesting thought because at the core of this message is the idea that if you want to be the greatest, then you have to take the back seat. It's not up to you. Jesus used many other sayings like don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. You've heard these sayings before, haven't you? Are they memorable? Now, here's the question. Why would you do that? Why would you make memorable sayings? Why would you say things like that? Unless it's something very valuable that needs to be passed on. It's something that you want others to get and to get and to get. And that's how often philosophers and teachers worked. Jesus taught in the streets, not to church seats. This is a very interesting thing. He found himself in so many different contexts to make sure that the people that he was speaking to were the lowest of society. Why? Because they needed flourishing and they needed happiness. They needed a new outlook. And I think the sad reality is we've separated the teachings of Jesus from our faith so much so that the reality that we're looking at in Australia is we're seeing a rise in the nuns. Not those ladies that dress up in those long black robes, but the NONES. In the recent census data, there are more and more people suggesting that they have no religion. They actually think that Christianity doesn't work in day-to-day life. It's not just that some of them would even say they believe in Jesus and that they would be Christian, but they would still write that they're a nun. Why? Because they suggest that it doesn't work. It's useless. Jesus' teachings are outdated. But are they? Because his message stood the test of time and is still around to this day. And I do have another picture to share with you. The disciples who heard his message thought they were so valuable that they would write them down and share them even at the expense of their own life sometimes. We're going to look a little bit at that tomorrow, but for today I want to show you this. This is from a place called Oxyrhynchus. I'm a huge nerd and fan of Oxyrhynchus. Has anyone heard of this place? Every time I go, and even people who read the Bible a lot will never have heard about this place, but you've got to find out about it. You've got to Google it, whatever you want to do. Look up the Wikipedia article, Oxyrhynchus. The interesting thing about this is it's a place in Egypt, and it was a place of archaeological exploration. And as they were exploring this place that was a garbage dump, Like, what a place to do archaeology, a dump. They found a cache of manuscripts that were very ancient, like 1700 years plus ancient. Could even be 1900 years ancient. A collection of documents of all sorts. Someone's stash of books got trashed here and was forgotten about. And of these many, many documents, tons of them were manuscripts of the New Testament. What you're looking at here is the Gospel of Matthew. Not the whole thing, of course, but it's a part of it. And this Gospel of Matthew dates to 198 AD. That is very old. And what fascinates scholars is how extensive and across the whole New Testament the collection is. There is a lot of documents. And now the thing that I naturally ask is, why is there no, like, how can you determine the date of this thing by looking at it? And when you do look at it, it's just I'm pretty sure it's Greek from memory, or it might be Syriac. But what's interesting, if I can go to the next one, is there was one document found there, because there was tons of other things like diary notes and letters. And this interesting thing, this is the first arrest warrant in history. The first arrest warrant that we have access to in history. It's got a date on it, which is helpful. It's 28th of February 256, according to the standard that it puts on it, but it actually uses the king's, the emperor's reigning year to tell you that. And it's an arrest warrant for this guy named Peter Serapion of Horace. Poor Peter Serapion. I mean, we're looking at his arrest warrant. But usually arrest warrants from time periods afterwards that we have usually gave a reason, like they stole something or they murdered someone. But this doesn't have anything except one thing. Peter Serapion of Horace is a Christian. Peter Serapion of Horace is a Christian. Amongst all these files, and who knows, maybe this was his collection that got thrown into the dump, was a collection of manuscripts of the Bible, of other letters, of other books. But what it tells you is this was in Oxyrhynchus, Egypt. And this was at least 200 years later. People 200 years after Jesus was crucified and laid in a tomb were still talking about his messages. They were still sharing his messages. Why? Because it had something that mattered and that made a difference. People believed it, and it changed their life for the better. 15,000 manuscripts of the New Testament exist. I don't write a lot of stuff, but if I wrote something over and over and over again, and I started sharing that with people, wouldn't that tell you that that's something really special? At least to Jacob. And imagine if tons of people were doing that. They kept sharing these different manuscripts around and making copies of them, and in multiple different languages. By the time of the 9th century, 15,000 manuscripts of the New Testament are in existence that we have access to. What about all the other ones? What about all the other people that were Christians who might have had copies of the New Testament that got killed? We're talking about something massive here that kept getting shared and passed around. Why? Because if a teacher has something worthwhile, you live by it. I received 2 copies of Barefoot Investors from a friend, or rather from 2 friends. Why? Because they really thought it's a great book that will help me save money. I don't know if that was a hint or if that was a cue that I need to start saving money, but it was helpful. But by 200 years later, Christianity was spread out from Egypt to Europe to Iraq to Syria to Turkey. People were talking about Jesus because it made a difference. We've been talking about, is it believable? Is it livable? Well, these people thought it was. And I always invite people, if you could see that lots of people throughout history have found value in this, could there be something in it? Could there be something in this book when you open it to explore these texts that is valuable and that is life-changing? Now, there's one more detail here before I come to the end. When you open up the New Testament Gospels, there's 4 of them. What do you notice? It's some teachings in there, but it's also a lot of stories of his life. Now, this is the fascinating thing. When we compare the wisdom of Jesus and his teachings to the philosophers of his time and the wisdom that they taught, what we actually discover is that all people, all disciples who wrote of their masters and teachers did this. Why? Because they wanted to show us, did their beliefs actually matter? Did it actually work in real life? Did Jesus actually live the best life? Was he actually flourishing as a human being? That's what often Plato and Socrates' disciples would do. They would write stories about their master. It's kind of like this. If I started telling you about how amazing it is to read Barefoot Investor, and I know I've come back to this a couple of times, conventional wisdom about how to have savings and to live a good life financially, but I was bankrupt and I was asking you for money on the street, would you be ready to take that book? If I was a financial planner even, and I came to you and said, I can help you get a home loan, I can get you to get a house, but I was bankrupt, are you excited to come to me to get financial advice from me? How about if I was a PT trainer and I was obese? Would you be excited about that? I don't think so either. That's the key thing here. The reason why they would include the wisdom and the life of the person is because did it work? And 100% the gospel writers believe it did. Jesus lived the best life. Remember one of the sayings, the Son of Man came to not be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. This is the most mind-boggling part of it. Jesus didn't just believe his teachings in his life, but he even believed it to his death. He lived for others even to his death. He served others even to his death. And that's what the disciples recognized. This is someone that has something amazing to offer. And as you'll find, there's even something else that they saw in Jesus' story that was completely mind-boggling and life-changing. But we'll come back to that tomorrow. But this is the key thing. The difference to Jesus' way of living and the difference to other people's way of living or other philosophies is not the goal. We all want to be happy. We all want to flourish. But here is the difference. It's the means to which we achieve that. Because in other philosophies, you must learn to do this and apply it. But in Jesus' teaching, it's not about adding something new or learning something new or accomplishing something new. Happiness isn't bought from Jesus, it's embraced. Happiness isn't achieved, it's received. This is the very key teaching here of Jesus, that the gospel message is not something I will accomplish and become great, but that he has already done for me. The Bible's message is that to be truly happy is to know Jesus, to know him. And when we know him, that's when our life starts to come into order. The early disciples, who would even go to their own grave for Jesus, recognized that there was a power working in their life to help them with the way that they use their money. They would literally give up all their money. Isn't that just crazy? They would give up all their money because they loved Jesus. Not just a tenth or just a couple coins. They would sell everything because they recognized money didn't make them happy. They would choose to live differently to their culture, be called a bunch of cannibals by their culture, be called incestuous by their culture. That's a real thing. People thought because they called each other brother and sister that they were practicing incest. How crazy is that? And they even thought they were cannibals because they took in the body and blood of Jesus. A symbol, of course. But this is the key thing. They found a new life worth living. A life that was so different. And so I want to invite you here tonight. You may have seen this book many times, but I don't want you to walk away from it and say, it's just another book. Or even more to say, I'm just going to keep doing my devotionals every day, but to recognize that this is a life philosophy, shaping the way that you make decisions across the spectrum of challenges, whether it's relationships, finance, whatever it might be. And I want to invite you to think, where in my life am I currently not living in the philosophy of Jesus, living in the way of Jesus? Because what if that's the thing that's making me unhappy and making me miserable? This is a challenge to myself as much as to you, and I hope that you can walk away from this talk recognizing, okay, that was a lot of information, but also that there's an invitation to know the one who wants you to live the best life. And then to recognize that through us, we will help others live the best life too. Shall we wrap it up? Shall we leave it there? Why don't we sing one more, and then I'll come and pray for you all. But may I just encourage you that your Christian faith has power and it has an impact on your life. Why don't we sing our last song together? Tell me what the song is, Tash. Indescribable. Why don't we stand to our feet and sing this song together?